Morayo breathed hard as her body began moving on its own, her legs carrying her back towards the village. The spirits inside the dreads were ready to unleash their anger on the villagers. One by one, the villagers fell. Some tried to fight back, but their weapons were no match for the power that was controlling Morayo. Others hid in their homes, praying for safety, but the dreads tore through walls and doors like they were nothing. Morayo watched in horror, trapped in her own mind as the spirits used her body to carry out their revenge. In a village called Alagomeji, there's one story that stands out. A story about a girl whose dreads were more than just hair. Her hair was like a bridge to the spirit world. If only they had known what kind of power was hidden in her dreads, they would have never let her stay. This is the story of Morayo, a small, slender girl, no more than 15 years old. When Morayo first arrived in the village of Alagomeji, she was quiet and kept to herself. But she wasn't an ordinary girl. There was something mysterious about her that made the villagers uneasy. What really caught everyone's attention was her hair. Her dreads were long, thick, and as black as the night sky. They flowed down her back, and each strand seemed to move on its own. The villagers had never seen anything like it. It wasn't just the length or the thickness. It was the way her dreads seemed to sway gently, even when there was no breeze. Morayo had come to live with her grandmother, Mama Agba, after her parents mysteriously disappeared. From the moment she stepped into Alagomeji, the villagers couldn't stop whispering about her. They spoke of dark magic, spirits that cling to people, and curses passed down through generations. But no one dared to confront Morayo or her grandmother. As the days turned into weeks, Morayo quietly settled in. She kept to herself, rarely speaking with the other villagers. Even Mama Agba, who was well respected for her wisdom and connection to the spiritual world, seemed to withdraw a bit after Morayo arrived. The villagers noticed how the two women would sit together in the evenings, talking quietly in low voices. One evening, Mama Agba called Morayo into their small hut. "Morayo," she began, "there's something you need to know. Your dreads, they're not just hair. They're the hands of our ancestors, a gift from the spirits that hold the power to protect or destroy." Morayo looked up at her grandmother, fear in her eyes. She had always sensed there was something different about her hair, but she never really understood what it was. Mama Agba gently placed her hands on Morayo's forehead, and as she did, a strange warmth spread through Morayo's body. She could feel the presence of something ancient and powerful, something that had been quietly resting inside her all along. "Never let anyone touch your hair, Morayo. The spirits are restless, and if they're awakened, they won't be easy to calm. You have to learn to control them, or they'll consume you." Morayo nodded, but inside, she was terrified. The spirits had chosen her, but she wasn't sure if she could handle the power inside her hair. At night, she would lie awake, feeling the gentle touch of invisible hands as they braided and unbraided her hair, whispering secrets she couldn't understand. The villagers began to notice the change in Morayo. Her dreads seemed to get longer and thicker every day, and this only made them more uneasy. They started avoiding her, afraid of the power they could sense within her. Rumors started spreading. Some villagers claimed they saw her talking to herself in the forest, with her dreads moving like a nest of snakes. Others said they heard strange noises coming from her hut at night, like voices that didn't belong to this world. No one dared to confront Morayo. They were too scared. But there was one man named Akin who was different. Akin was a bully, known for his bad behavior. The villagers tolerated him, but they kept their distance. Akin had heard the whispers about Morayo, the strange girl with the living dreads, and the tales of the power hidden within her. But Akin wasn't easily scared by stories. To him, Morayo was just a small girl, and she seemed like an easy target. One night, under the cover of darkness, Akin decided to act. The village was quiet, and Morayo was in her hut, lying on her mat, drifting between the world of the living and the realm of spirits. She could feel the spirits in her dreads growing restless, but she was too tired to care. Akin crept through the village like a predator stalking its prey. He had waited for this moment, knowing the village would be deep in sleep. As he approached Morayo's hut, a wicked smile crept across his face. He pushed open the door, but Morayo was fast asleep, too deep in her dreams to wake up. Akin moved closer to her and reached out with a small knife, ready to cut her dreads. Akin grabbed Morayo's dreads with both hands, planning to yank her awake and take what he wanted. Morayo's eyes snapped open. The dreads came to life, and for a moment she was disoriented. But when she saw Akin struggling against her dreads, she quickly realized what was happening. They wrapped around his wrists with incredible strength, tightening like a python's grip. Akin gasped, his eyes wide with terror as he tried to pull away, but the dreads held him tightly. The spirits in her hair had awakened, sensing the danger, and they were protecting her in the only way they knew how. Akin fought to free himself, but his strength was no match for the supernatural force that held him. The dreads squeezed his wrists, pulling him closer to Morayo. His breath came in short, ragged gasps as he felt the life being drained out of him. He tried to scream, but the dreads wrapped tightly around his throat, cutting off his air. In his final moments, Akin's mind was filled with panic and regret. He had underestimated Morayo and the power within her, and now he was paying the price. His vision blurred, and the last thing he saw was Morayo's face. Then, everything went black. When the villagers woke up to the sound of Akin's scream, they rushed to Morayo's hut, their hearts racing with fear. What they found terrified them. Akin's lifeless body lay twisted on the ground, his hands tightly wrapped in Morayo's dreads, his face frozen in an expression of pure terror. It was clear he had met a violent end, but there was no sign of a struggle, no wounds on his body, only the deadly grip of Morayo's hair. The villagers were in shock, their emotions all mixed up between relief and fear. On one hand, they were glad that Morayo had escaped Akin's evil plans. Everyone was scared of him, and his death felt like they were finally free from his terror. But at the same time, what they had seen left them terrified. Morayo's dreads weren't just hair. They were a weapon, a force none of them could understand. Rumors spread quickly. People started talking about the spirits that lived in Morayo's dreads, the power she had, and the danger she brought with her. No one could look at her the same way anymore. Even those who once felt sorry for her now kept their distance, crossing themselves whenever she walked by. The village elders, who were responsible for keeping tradition and spiritual balance, knew they had to do something. In the end, they made a decision. The only way to protect the village, and maybe even Morayo herself, was to break the connection between her and the spirits. They decided to cut off her dreads, removing the source of the power that scared them all. Mama Agba, who had always known the danger hidden in her granddaughter's hair, was the one chosen to lead the ritual. But her heart was heavy with fear and sadness. She had hoped it would never come to this, but there was no other choice. That night, under the cover of darkness, the villagers gathered at the edge of the forest, where it was said the spirits lived. Morayo stood in the center of the circle, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. She didn't understand why this was happening, why they were doing this to her, but she trusted Mama Agba. Mama Agba had prepared everything carefully. She had brought a sharp knife, a bowl of sacred herbs, and a small bottle of oil, everything needed for the ritual. Morayo, Mama Agba said softly, her voice barely more than a whisper. The spirits have become too strong. If we don't break the connection now, they will take over you. Morayo nodded, understanding the risk. She knew what was at stake, but she trusted Mama Agba with her life. Mama Agba started the ritual, chanting softly in an ancient language. The air filled with the scent of the herbs as she sprinkled them around Morayo, creating a protective circle. Then, with shaking hands, she took the knife and began cutting Morayo's dreads, one by one. As the first dread hit the ground, a mournful wail filled the air, echoing through the forest like the cries of lost souls. Morayo winced, feeling the spirits inside her clawing, trying to hold on, trying to resist being cut off. But Mama Agba kept going, her hands steady, her determination unwavering. One by one, the dreads fell, and with each one the wails grew louder, the air heavier with the spirit's presence. Morayo could feel them slipping away, their anger and desperation pressing down on her. But she knew she had to endure it. Finally, the last dread was cut. As soon as it hit the ground, everything went very quiet. It felt like the whole world had just stopped. Morayo stood there shaking, her scalp stinging where the dreads had been cut. She was tired, drained from the ritual, but deep down she knew something was very wrong. The spirits, instead of peacefully returning to the ancestors like they were supposed to, were growing more restless. Suddenly, the dreads on the ground began to twitch. One by one, they started moving like dark snakes across the forest floor. Morayo's eyes widened with fear as she watched, frozen in place, while the dreads twisted and coiled together into one. They weren't just hair anymore. They had become something alive, a scary creature filled with anger. Mama Agba should have known better. You don't tamper with the spirit world. Before she could react, the dreads shot toward her like a bolt of lightning. They wrapped tightly around Mama Agba's legs, arms, and body, squeezing with an unexplainable force. The old woman struggled, her eyes wide with shock and pain as the dreads lifted her off the ground, dangling her like a puppet. No, this isn't how it's supposed to be. Mama Agba cried, her voice filled with desperation. She tried to break free, but the dreads kept squeezing tighter and tighter, refusing to let go. Morayo's eyes were wide with shock, watching as her grandmother was strangled by the dreads right in front of her. She wanted to look away, to close her eyes and block out the nightmare, but she couldn't. The dreads, the spirits, they were out of control now. She couldn't stop them, and she couldn't save her grandmother from the horror unfolding before her. The forest echoed with Mama Agba's screams, her voice growing weaker and weaker, until she was finally strangled to death by the merciless grip of the dreads. As Mama Agba's body dropped to the ground, the dreads crawled back towards Morayo, reattaching themselves to her scalp with a strange, squishy sound. Morayo could feel the energy rushing back into her. She grabbed her head, screaming as the pain grew worse, her cries echoing through the forest. To her shock, her dreads began growing back, thick, dark strands sprouting from her scalp, twisting and moving like snakes. But these weren't ordinary dreads. They were longer, thicker, and pulsing with a strange, dark energy. Each lock felt like a hand, coiled and ready to strike. The dreads seemed to have a mind of their own, moving without Morayo's control. She could feel them taking over her thoughts, filling her mind with dark, twisted ideas. The spirits had returned, but this time, they weren't just protecting her. They had taken over. They controlled her now, and their thirst for revenge was unstoppable. Morayo's eyes, once full of fear, now glowed with a dark, unnatural light. She tried to fight it, to push the spirits away, but they were too strong. They had taken root deep inside her, and there was nothing she could do to stop them. Morayo breathed hard as her body began moving on its own, her legs carrying her back towards the village. She tried to stop, to turn back, but it was like she was a puppet, controlled by the dark force that had taken hold of her. As she neared the village, her dreads became more restless, twisting with anticipation. The spirits inside the dreads were ready to unleash their anger on the villagers. The villagers, still shaken by what they had seen earlier, had no idea what was about to happen to them. Morayo's dreads, now fully controlled by the spirits, moved with deadly accuracy, striking down anyone in their path. The first person the dreads attacked was the elderly village chief, who had advised Mama Agba to cut the dreads. He barely had time to react before the dreads wrapped around his neck, choking him. His eyes widened in fear as he tried to pull them off, but his struggle was in vain. The dreads were too strong. Within moments, his lifeless body collapsed to the ground. Fear spread quickly across the village. The villagers ran in every direction, their faces filled with terror as they tried to escape. But the dreads were relentless, moving with incredible speed and force, leaving no chance for almost anyone to get away. One by one, the villagers fell. Some tried to fight back, but their weapons were no match for the power that was controlling Morayo. Others hid in their homes, praying for safety, but the dreads tore through walls and doors like they were nothing. Morayo watched in horror, trapped in her own mind as the spirits used her body to carry out their revenge. She could feel each person fall and the lives lost. The pain and guilt tore at her heart, but she couldn't stop it. Finally, as the dreads loosened their grip on her mind, Morayo began to regain her senses. She blinked, and her vision cleared. What she saw was beyond anything she could imagine. The village of Alagomeji, once full of life, was now destroyed. Bodies lay scattered everywhere, frozen in fear and pain. Tears rolled down her face as Morayo took a step back, her body shaking with exhaustion and fear. The dreads became lifeless again, as they hung loosely from her head, but she could still feel the power within them, waiting to be unleashed again. Without thinking, she turned and ran, desperate to escape the damage she had done. She didn't look back, didn't stop to mourn the lives that were lost. All she could do was run, her heart racing, her mind filled with fear and guilt. Morayo ran until she couldn't run any longer. She collapsed on the ground, her body shaking with exhaustion as she breathed hard. The forest around her was quiet. The only sound was her own heartbeat. She had escaped the village, but deep down, she knew she could never escape the darkness inside her. The villagers of Alagomeji never saw Morayo again, but her story lived on. They whispered about her, passing the tale down through generations as a warning about the dangers that lurk in the unseen world. Some believed that Morayo had turned into a spirit herself, wandering the earth with the power of the ancestors flowing through her veins. Others claimed they had seen her in the dead of night, her hair moving like a living creature. They avoided the forest where Morayo had fled, convinced it was cursed, and they never spoke her name aloud, afraid it might bring her back. But one thing was certain. Alagomeji would never forget the girl whose dreads were more than just hair. The villagers knew that somewhere out there, in the dark, unforgiving wilderness, Morayo was still out there, her power growing stronger with each passing day. And they prayed they would never cross paths with her again.